Welcome back, friends. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a somewhat well-known Korean video game company called Nexon and the amount of success that they've been seeing within the last few years. If you've been playing video games online for a while now, you'll likely have heard the name Nexon floating around. Now, Nexon has become somewhat infamous for making a whole lot of poor business decisions that ended up killing a lot of their video games and video game franchises. Now, not all the video games that they've hosted or published have been bad or have ended up bad, but there are quite a lot of horror stories out there, including one that's personally close to my heart, which was the North American version of DnF. Now, there was a lot of craziness that happened back in the day with Dungeon Fighter Online, and for whatever reason, a lot of accounts got hacked, and we pretty much lost everything. And shortly after that happened, because there wasn't a lot done to restore the issue and to try to fix what might happen again in the future, the North American version had to shut down permanently. And this was very unfortunate for me because I was a huge fan of this game, and that was pretty much my main game at the time. And so it pretty much just left a very sour taste in my mouth for Nexon. Now, Nexon does have a lot of good games out there and a lot of ones that have lasted and have stood the test of time, including a very well-known one that I've been talking about recently on my channel called Vindictus. Apart from that, they've also had a couple of other long-lasting games, such as Kingdom of the Wind and Legends of Darkness, which are somewhat older in style, but also very unique. And of course, the whole DnF game that has been going on for ages and is still extremely popular in Asia. Now, just because they are infamous for those many bad business decisions doesn't mean that they can't bounce back from it. And we've seen this to be true within the last few years with a lot of projects coming from Nexon currently. One of those successful projects is the DnF fighting game. And even though it may not be that well known, I think mostly that's due to the fact that the fighting games community is a little bit smaller than the vast majority of the gaming community in whole. So I think it has more to do with them being somewhat more niche. However, it doesn't mean that the game isn't successful because of that. Now, the game premise itself makes sense because even in the original Dungeon Fighter, there was a whole lot of PvP, and in fact, PvP was pretty much half of the game after a certain point. And even today, there are a lot of Dungeon Fighter PvP contests out there and tournaments, so it does make a lot of sense that this came into existence. But it also is really interesting that they made this separate from an online game. While it is multiplayer because players can fight against each other in the game, it isn't necessarily an online game. It's pushed more towards a single player style game. And it looks like they've been headed this way for a while now, and they've also had a lot of success with single player games such as Kazan, the First Berserker. Now, Kazan takes place within the DnF verse, or the universe that DnF exists in, so he is one of the lore characters for that video game. And the game itself is quite successful, with a lot of people talking about it and it being shared throughout social media for being a sort of Souls-like type game. And it does look like a lot of fun, even though I personally have not had the chance to play it, but I definitely will give that a shot in the future. Now, as for new online game projects, they do have a few of them in the works. Primarily, they have a sort of remake of DnF coming out. It's called DnF Overkill. And what this is a complete overhaul of the graphical engine and the style of battles. It is somewhat more freeform, but also it is a 3D style version of DnF. Whereas the previous rendition of DnF was a 2D side-scroller, this will be a 3D side-scroller, but it still looks to retain a lot of the soul of the original game. Separate from that, they do have another upcoming game, which is actually an open world video game based in the DnF world called Project Arid. Now, Project Arid is essentially the open world version of DnF, Arid being the name of the world that the DnF universe takes place in. And we have seen a trailer or two of this upcoming project. Now, that's not to say that Nexon hasn't had some issues coming up with new online games that may work in their favor. So for example, the original video game where Kazan took a lot of its inspiration and resources from was called Project BBQ. And that was a game that I was looking very much forward to, and unfortunately it never saw the light of day. Now, do I think that was a mistake on their part? Well, a lot of the devs mentioned that the project was sort of all over the place and didn't really have a clear direction. And because of that, they were actually satisfied with moving all those resources over to Kazan, which seems like a good decision at this point in time, but I still don't like that they got rid of the idea. Regardless, Nexon has their foot in the door of a lot of different areas right now. Again, the fighting game scene, the single player Souls-like scene, and again, they're going back to the roots with the online games with DnF, Overkill, and Project Arid. And Project Arid, I think, is going to be sort of like their Genshin-esque, that's going to compete against a lot of these other more modern, more current open world style games. And I assume it may be somewhat of a gacha, which I hope it's not, but that just may be something we'll have to deal with in the future. Now, I am going into these games with a little bit of caution, but I also want to be hopeful because, again, not every game from Nexon is bad, but they just have such a sordid history and a very poor reputation because of the things that have happened in the past that you kind of got to be a little bit cautious. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket. And I mean, that's something I've learned from my experience with Dungeon Fighter Online and just really took it all out of me because of that. So if you're interested in these types of games, go into it knowing that Nexon does not always make the best decisions, but also go into it with the knowledge that they are doing a lot better now and they are making a lot more sound decisions, and you're going to see them in a lot of places. So hopefully they've learned their lessons, and hopefully these projects will be something worth putting your time and energy into, and hopefully they'll be a lot of fun. So these are just my thoughts on current day Nexon and a lot of the projects that they have out and that are coming out. So I do hope that they continue on this path forward, and I hope that they build a lot of goodwill with the players, and let's see what the future holds with Nexon. I'm willing to give it a shot, and hopefully you are as well. That's it for now. If you like gaming content like gameplay, narratives, game reviews, gaming news, and commentary, consider liking this video and subscribe to The Hero's Blade. Until next time, wish you all the best, and God bless.